This is Full Coffers with your host, Phil and Tony Buggs from Abundant Harvest Christian Fellowship Ministries.
And this week on Full Coffers, The Journey, Part 12. Wow, okay. The last time I think we left off was kind of like what I call my transition. And we talked about, toward the end, kind of a transition that you were beginning to make.
Yeah. We had finished up. We really were realigning ourselves as a couple, shattering speed bumps that were hindering our forward progress as a couple. And so Tony and I worked through that, each of us individually.
Yes.
But now we find ourselves settling in again, still in Nashville, enjoying our lives.
Yeah, we had kind of gotten to a routine, and not a bad routine, but it was a good routine.
It was. Found a good church home. There were things like that. Job, was it going fairly well?
Well, I think initially with even in Nashville going through working in industry, there were some high points, low points, and
right.
You had gotten laid off at another job, and then you had to work this job, which was on the machines again, and it was a night shift.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't really great for us because that means we barely saw each other.
True.
Unless it was on the weekend kind of thing. So that kind of sucked, especially for the kids. But, hey, we got to feed kids, so we got to do what we got to do.
That's true.
But during that time, I kind of noticed Philip was Philip has always been jovial, don't get me wrong. Philip really doesn't have a bad day. But I did notice something was going on with him.
Yeah, it something was remembering or recounting that the reason why we left Detroit was a command or a
directive.
Directive. That's it from God telling us to do better.
Mm-hmm.
And in Detroit, I had was doing well, and I'm speaking more spiritually than anything. And so moving down to Nashville, I found that band of brothers that really helped out. And I was teaching Sunday school, which I love to do.
And you were singing in the male chorus.
Ooh. So spiritually, carrying on and feeling my Christian life, I thought that would give me fulfillment. I was playing drums up in Detroit, but really wasn't able to play drums when I moved down to Nashville. I'm saying all of this because I'm now starting to find myself becoming uncomfortable or less content because I really thought that I was becoming stagnant. There was something else stirring in me that I didn't know what was going on.
And I was thinking that maybe it was because you were working nights. And I get that because he, over the years, has worked nights a lot. And it just sucks. It's like you can't seem to get it together. Sleep-wise, you didn't get good sleep. And then trying to make up for on the weekends, trying to put all the stuff in that you missed during the week and getting with the kids and all of that. So I was thinking that maybe he was just not happy with the job. Heck, I wasn't happy with him working those hours. But it appeared to be something deeper.
That's true. The church we had become members of was a larger church, but I still felt that my pastor, if I had questions spiritually, that he was the person I would go to. So I made an appointment to see the pastor, and he, welcomed me in. Like I said, I've been teaching Sunday school, and I really, honestly, I did not know why I was going to him. I was just talking to my pastor because I was uncomfortable. Something was going on, and I didn't know what it was. And so as I sat in the office, and I told him, I says, quite honestly, I don't know why I'm here. So let me just start talking, and maybe by the time I get through, you can tell me what's going on. And our pastor was he had a great personality. He really did. He was really easy to talk to. And he listened, and as I was talking...
And blubbering.
I found myself... I'm up here welling up and
I wasn't there, but he told me.
But I'm saying, what is going on? And as I'm talking, I can start to see this smile on my pastor's face and, to a big grin. And all of a sudden, I'm like saying, do I have mustard on my lip or something? I mean, why is he laughing at me? And finally, I stopped and I says, I don't know what's happening. And he told me, he said, son, I know what it is. I says, but what I want you to do is I want you to go back and I want you to read the book of Isaiah twice. First time just to get through it. And the second time I want you to read it and read it from the standpoint of trying to comprehend what God is telling you. And so that's what I did. And by the second time I read the book, something that had been in me for years earlier came back. And it was, now I'm going to use this word, it was confirmation that God was calling me to preach. And that is something that I did not, if I say I did not want to do, but in the same breath, I wanted to because of what an honor it would be to preach, to tell people who don't know about God, to tell them about God. But it was clouded by my image of preaching from years ago that I really didn't want to embrace it.
Because you couldn't hoop. Oops. Did I see that? Stop it. Sorry, folks out there.
Unfortunately, when I thought about the vocation of ministry in the Black Baptist experience, when you connect the vocation of preaching the gospel ministry in Black people vernacular,
Cadillac.
money,
I am going to get messed up.
oh Lord, we're going to get
We're going to take away our Baptist card.
But all those things about preaching as what the Black vernacular would equate that vocation to preach the gospel ministry. We called it preaching. And oftentimes, preachers were ranked by their ability to draw the crowd, get the amens. By the end of the sermon, everybody's up on their feet and hollering and the Black Baptist experience getting happy and that sort of thing. And I just did not see myself doing that. So that's why I ran from it.
Now, in a plug there, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about the Black Baptist Church and the experience because, let's face it, you and I would not be sitting here had it not been for that experience.
True.
And so, as I said in previous episodes, my grandfather, my mother's father, he was a Baptist preacher. He was a pastor. We understand what our culture has done for us in that way and will never, ever be ashamed of that. However, unfortunately, my grandfather did have a Cadillac. But as Philip was saying, there was certain connotations about some preachers, right. And we know all preachers or Black Baptist preachers are not like that.
No,
we know many of them are definitely truly called by the Spirit.
Agreed.
Unfortunately, over the years, though, we have learned that a lot of these Black ministers are looking at it as a hustle.
Yes.
And so as Philip was coming up, we have seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And I guess from Philip's experience, he had a lot of good in his life in terms of examples.
I did.
But unfortunately, we've also seen a lot of not so good.
Which is why when I looked at where I fit in how to serve God, I did not see that as a right fit for me.
Because you were a deacon, and that was good.
Yes, I was a deacon. I was a Sunday school teacher, and I thought that was Philip's world. That was enough. Plus, if I could play drums also for a group, that just
cherry
to me.
On top.
Yeah, exactly. So I figured that was what I was slated for. Not so in God's plan for my life. To Tony's point, as I first started out talking about preaching from a very, if I use this word, comical stance. I by no means want to diminish the sincerity of that office, because indeed it was preachers that got me to first look at God and understand that I was accountable to Him. I had good pastors in my life, and I'm going to call them out because they were. Pastor Lee Earl, that by this recording, he has gone on to be with the Lord. Prior to him was Ken Harris, Reverend Ken Harris, Dr. Ken Harris. Fantastic. I love Pastor Harris so much. And also Pastor Bruce Maxwell. Those three men shaped the kind of man I wanted to be. And if I were going to be a preacher, it would be on their order. Two of the three of those pastors were not, quote unquote, hoopers, but even the one that did, his message was solid. You knew what the word was. You didn't leave with just feeling good. You left challenged in your own life to be a better person.
Go home, open up your Bible,
yes,
and read it
check
for
it
yourself.
out. Exactly. They encouraged us to read that Bible. And if I were going to become a person in that vocation, that is what I wanted the people to know. So all that being said, all of a sudden, Phil is having his life turned upside down because I'm inside of the pastor's office with this revelation that I think I'm being called to preach. Now hear me. God done said it, but Phil still got to think about it. So that is what, and at this time, I thought about how to best bring that all about, and what we're going to do if it's in good taste. Instead of me trying to talk about it, I asked Tony if she would interview me in terms of how this all came about and what it has meant to me since then. I guess if I'm suiting that right.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, be quiet now. Now, as he was going through this metamorphosis, I guess I should say really a revelation, I kind of knew when we were dating something was different about him. You know, I could not put my finger on it, but there was something different about him as a young man. Didn't think minister was going to pop into the scenario, but I think once he went to see Pastor Maxwell the first time and he disclosed to me what the discussion was about, I pretty much knew at that point that's what it was. It was Philip that needed convincing that was that was happening. Yeah. I think he was saying anything but, which brings me to the reason why I wanted to really ask him questions, because not only are we just talking about Philip's experience into the ministry, we know and we're hoping that those who may not be of the faith and those who are of the faith may be challenged with something in their life and not feeling exactly like they're doing all that they can do in their lives, kind of a disjointing, imbalance in their life. And what we also are kind of psychology enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And we understand the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Correct. Yep.
We know that the very top of that is self-actualization.
Correct. Yep.
Now, I know some of our Christian friends may be thinking, well, that's not of the Bible. Well, kind of it is.
Yes. When taken in the right context.
Exactly. So if I can give a brief psychology lesson really quickly, is that self-actualization from the
social sciences.
From the social sciences means that Tony has discovered who Tony is and what Tony's purpose and destiny should be. I emphasize Tony because that emphasizes I discovered what my purpose and my destiny, and I discovered self-actualization.
Correct.
That's not true. What really is happening is Tony finally stopped bumping her head up against the wall and fit into what God's purpose was for my life like a glove.
Uh-huh.
So when folks are out there saying, I discovered who I am, or I found this, or whatever, that's not true. You basically fell into what God had planned for you all along. You just finally gave up on being self-serving and have accepted what God has planned for you. Philip's case, Philip kind of ran from it. Even after that first initial interview with Pastor Maxwell, he still came home doubting.
True.
And my question to you is, why?
It couldn't be that.
Why couldn't it be?
Because Philip didn't think that Philip was good enough to be a preacher. Philip could play baseball. I wanted to be a baseball player. God
and what happened?
said no. And I said, no. I could play drums. But as a vocation, I wasn't that good. But I could, if I could practice. But the point being...
I also know you wanted to be in the Air Force.
Yes, I wanted to fly jets.
But guess what happened?
I started wearing glasses. All those things Philip wanted to do, best of intentions, that was not where, if I use the word out of the Christian context, that wasn't where life was steering me. I did know that internally I had the ability to break very high-tech terminology into everyday language. I remember when I was in Focus Hope going through the training program, because I understood calculus and trigonometry from a functional standpoint, I was actually teaching some of my other classmates how to understand a 30, 60, 40. So teaching was something that I had been doing. When I was a Sunday school teacher, I was good at teaching. How does this all make sense in terms of God calling me to preach? Well, isn't one of the primary functions of preachers is to teach, to make clear the word? Yes. So there were things that God was preparing me for. Danielson, wax on, wax off, all these years. And I didn't know that actually that preaching, being a minister, being called for that vocation was going to be my self-actualization. And quite honestly, I didn't think I would do that. If I say it like this, self-actualization is actually realizing what God has intended for you. Not what you intend,
exactly,
but what God intends. That's the self-actualization. We're actually realizing what God and where God wants us to be.
And even after, again, you had the conversation, the second conversation with Pastor Maxwell, you still did. Here I am. Now, I have to say this. Around the time that he received his calling was around the time that that movie with Whitney Houston, the pastor's wife or the bishop's wife or something. It was a remake. So I'm thinking, ooh, I get to be a pastor's wife, a minister's wife, something like that. I'm getting ready to get my dress because, you got your trial sermon and all this stuff. And Philip's still saying, I don't want to do that.
In fact, I went into a rant of, I want to make sure. How do I confirm? I want to be sure because I'm doubting. I'm doubting God. In the sense of doubting myself, it was a way for me to keep from doing that because now I'm looking for confirmation. Here's that word. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for confirmation. And so I'm saying, I think God has said. In my spirit, I know what God told me, but I'm thinking, well, I think God said, so I'm doubting what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. And so now I want confirmation. So now I go through this period of, how do I know for sure?
I'm telling him, and he's saying,
"No, my wife. No.
He's going to tell me. He's not going to tell me through you."
Yep,
I'm like, okay, fine, back off.
That is true. Well, I'll tell you. I'll cut right to the chase. I love the way God works. He has a way of slapping you and the sting in your face after you wake back up. You say, "May I have another, please?" Actually, what happened was...
you were working at night, so you had your days free.
I had my days off. And actually, Pastor Earl's mother needed to go to a medical appointment. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm saying all this because this is the way God framed it. And so I go down and I pick her up and I'm taking her. We got about a half an hour drive to the doctor's. And we're talking. And at the end, I finally just say, Mother Earl, I says, I got something I just want to ask you. I says, and I gave her my pitch about what I had talked with Pastor Maxwell about and how he said, I'm thinking God told me that I was called to preach. And she looked at me with the nicest, sweetest, motherly voice, oh, mother the church. And she said, and I have to put in her dialect, she says, baby, if God told you, what more convincing you need? And
Bingo.
right then is the cold slap across my face. In the same breath, it was affirmation that God was telling me, I want you as my messenger, my voice piece to the people. The same way as he called Isaiah, the same way as he has called other men into the gospel ministry, God called me. I didn't ask for this. It was something that I must admit, once I submitted, and I use that word because I stopped running. But I'm so glad that I stopped running from a standpoint of now I'm sure that God called me. Because the last thing I want to do is to try and preach his word without his power, without his protection. Because I recognize I'm going up against the second most powerful entity in this world. Outside of God, the next power is Satan, which is way less than God, but it's way more than any other mortal creature. So I was not going to be a minister of the gospel without being called by the God of creation. Once I knew that happened, I was on fire. Nothing
Yes,
could
he
stop me
was.
from that sense.
All inclusive of an hour and a half trial sermon.
I want the people to know,
He had a lot to say now. Oh, he got the call. A lot to say. I got the videotape to prove it. But
I listened to that. So Phil, save some, man. Save some. I just wanted it all out in one preaching.
And this was an 8 o'clock service.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
But when you accepted your calling and when you were trained,
yes,
I can say even up until this present day, and we can talk about that in future episodes, but your ministry has not been one of practicality in terms of, the traditional church.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
That would have been nice, but,
Yeah.
We always seem to do things the hard way. It's like, why can't things be... Well, I can't say that because there have been some things that have been just as smooth as butter, but Lord, it's like... It's been kind of an uphill battle ever since.
Yeah.
But having Philip truly understand what his calling or purpose, however you want to put it, in life, settled him.
It did.
And he has not looked back. I have never, ever, from all that time, from 1997 to this present moment, ever hear him say, I don't want to be a minister anymore.
No.
And I'm not, and honestly, even if pastors and ministers said that, I can understand out of just emotion because of the awesome responsibility that truly called individuals have in that. I probably would have said it the second day. Hey, where's the exit off this? Because you're dealing with people.
And they're trifling.
And, oh, man. But I don't blame them for saying that out of frustration.
Sure.
But the true ones will get back up. And they'll go back out there and say, send me in, coach.
That's because God gives them, and I want to make sure I say this correctly, is that ministers are empowered by God. The minute we start depending upon man to give us the energy and the strength we need to keep going, we're going to run out. It's only by the power of God that I continue to preach, teach, and I think more so live out this vocation that I'm called to. And it's interesting because a lot of people, when I introduce myself, I really don't put out there that I'm a minister. I'm not trying to trick people. I'm just trying to live this Christian life. And I honestly believe that Jesus, he lived in such a way that the worst of people felt comfortable around him. Because he didn't, if I use this word, judge their present actions. He was always looking at, I love you. I want what's best for you.
And his presence sometimes, well, I should say sometimes, usually made a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah, but
because they knew they weren't living right.
Exactly right. And yes, that's exactly right. So when God did call me to the ministry, I was thinking that it was going to be something pretty bread and butter. But Lord knows, only Lord knows, because I sure enough didn't. I had no idea of what kind of ministry he was preparing for me.
Exactly. And so I know we're kind of drawing to a close, but I would like to end on the note that this podcast episode really was, even though it focused on Philip and it focused on what his purpose, calling, destiny, whatever you want to call it, he found it. He accepted it, I guess I should say.
I think that's more, yeah, I accepted it.
We know that there are others out that possibly could be listening to this. If there's an uneasiness in your life, it would be to your advantage to figure out, are you living your full potential? And that's a cliche, and I know that.
No, I love that, and I think that this is a great segment or thing to end on. Years ago, God gave me, and I know he gave me this saying, and it's sort of like a conversation piece, but it has to do with your destiny, your purpose in life. And I framed it this way, God, and I talk about the gospel message. If I summed it up, it would be in these 3 simple phrases. The emptiness you feel in life, God has reserved for Jesus Christ. Nothing else will suffice. That's it. That is the gospel message.
That was made by Phil Buggs, too, by the way.
It is, because I recognize that's because until we submit ourselves to God's place in our life, we are constantly trying to put square pegs in the round hole
that don't fit.
They don't fit, and the other way around, and we get frustrated. And a lot of time we lash out at God for, why did you do this or why didn't you do that? Because we are resisting God's place in our life. So with that.
So I will end it on another note that in that same year, you were able to obtain the job of your life.
Isn't that something?
The job of your life.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit about the next episode. And I want to leave you with a cliffhanger.
A cliffhanger?
Yes. Yes, it was fantastic that Philip found his calling in the ministry. Wonderful. But we didn't know, little did we know, lurking around the corner, teenagers.
Oh, Lord. Oh, you do recognize those little joys and bundles that you have now.
The little silent people that was behind us? Oh, yeah, they're going to get loud and vocal right now, especially since Philip's a minister.
Oh, Lord. I had no clue.
I didn't either. I would have told you to revoke that minister thing, man.
I think had God gave us a crystal ball to look into where we were headed with her, we would have said,
oh, no.
Tony's cute, but I ain't marrying her.
See ya. So
anyway,
with that being said,
have a great week.
Yes, stay tuned to the next episode, but God bless. Have a great week. Talk to you soon.
This episode was produced and edited by Miss K. Simone. Cover graphics by Indefinite. Music by Miss K. Simone. So until next time, I'm Phil Buggs.
And I'm Tony Buggs.
Wishing you a wonderful week.